Hi, my name is Gordon MacDonald, and I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm a professional painter. Been here for about 20 years, and since 2002, I've sold work at Argyle Fine Art, and exclusively since 2005. This is the only place I sell, and this is my 17th show here, the solo show. Um, and it's a strange year, as we all know. It's been strange for the last 3 months, and none of us knew how this was going to play out. 2 months ago, we thought maybe what we're doing right now would be the only way we could do this, and maybe sell online. But who knew? Nobody knew what was going to happen. So, because Adriana, who owns the gallery, and myself, we sort of are familiar with improvisation and pivoting when you have to. Here we are, and we had an opening yesterday, and the opening went really well. People showed up, and people were buying, and because of what the circumstances were, and not knowing economically, I kept my work within certain sizes. I didn't paint any really large paintings. I think now I probably could have, or maybe I could have had one or two. I think I've got one that's 2 feet by 2 feet. Most is 18 inches or smaller, and I think I've got a 5 by 6 there somewhere. But everything I paint is on metal, and I usually paint scenes either in Nova Scotia that are reminiscent of Nova Scotia, or from my imagination. This is kind of from my imagination, and I like to start with an idea, and this is the idea of a landscape painted as a still life. And this is on aluminum. Everything is on copper. I've been painting on copper now off and on for 25 years, but pretty much exclusively since 2005. And so this happens to be on aluminum. As I was buying my copper, there was a piece of aluminum, and I said, "Can I buy that too?" And they sold me that. I cut it in two. There's another piece down there that's on copper, or on aluminum as well, but everything else is on copper. And that's from kind of my imagination. This is from a specific place. I do love living here, and I feel so lucky to be in Nova Scotia, especially in the last few months. This is a beach called Conrad's Beach. I go there, my wife and I go there every chance we get. It's a bird sanctuary, and there's usually not a lot of people, if any, on the beach, and it's a wonderful thing, especially when the sun's gone down. And I can paint that every year. I'll probably have one or two paintings of that. That and Tantramar. I love painting Tantramar as well. And what else? There's this. These two are because I paint on copper, I have to cut the copper. And as I was cutting it, somebody I knew was walking by. I was cutting it at NASCAD. I'm not affiliated with NASCAD, but they allow me, out of the kindness of their hearts, to use their metal brake. And I was using that, and a student walked by and said that her friend cuts circles, and so I thought, well, I can do that. So I had a square, and then I saw a bucket, the top of a bucket that happened to be the same width as this. So I scribed it, and with the metal brake, I cut it as closely as I could, and I used a file, and I got this. And so I thought, well, this is kind of a reminiscent of the 14th, 15th, 16th century icons, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to venerate some place in Nova Scotia that nobody really thinks of going? And in this case, it's Spring Hill, and there's a minimum security prison there. There's sinkholes around. Anne Murray grew up there, and there's blueberries. I think that's their claim to fame. So I made it as beautiful as I could, and you drive by and not even give it a second look. But I love those places because it's Spring Hill, Nova Scotia. So I put as beautiful a sky as I could possibly put, and the depth, and made it romantic. And yeah, that's on copper, and this is on copper. This is kind of an otherworldly feel to it. Again, with the curve on the top, is kind of reminiscent of something maybe 500 years ago. And this is kind of representative of a more aggressive palette that I have this year, and painting techniques that I'm exploring. I could reference them historically, but the palette that I'm using is phthalo and phthalo blue, phthalo green, and I'm mixing that with a little bit of raw umber, and I hate those colors, but it turns out if you put them all on at once and play them off one another, mix them together, they tame them, And because of that, I was able to put them back on my palette and have a lot of fun. And I did that this year, emerald green and all these really intense colors. And so, yeah, that was fun. As people know me, I love painting skies. This is an excuse to paint the cloud, and the cloud is basically just having fun with design. So, you know, you try to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is reminiscent of that. There's yellow, blue, and red, the primary colors, and it's adding these design elements in it that makes it a lot of fun. So that's what I did there. And this is the surprise. A lot of people wanted to buy this. Somebody did, but this is an example of really crazy colors, this phthalo blue, and mixing it with raw umber, which is also a very difficult color, and getting these beautiful greens in here. So this is raw umber, phthalo blue, and yellow ochre light, and you can get all that. So yeah, that's that one. The Eastern, that's just a generic stormy cove in Nova Scotia. These are two specific places in Nova Scotia. I've added things and left out things, but this is the other aluminum painting. And I love this format, this long format. And that line in the road I was really happy with, because I saw a painting in 1984 in Peterborough, Ontario, and I love this. The guy put a line in the road and it seemed to be almost three-dimensional, just sort of floated there. And I thought, I'm gonna try that. So I taped that off, and I loaded the paint up as much as I could, and let that dry, and took the tape off, and then painted everything around it. So yeah, and still life, I did a couple of still lifes this year. This is peony, and this peony is a result of a wonderful cake by Crystal Ross, who's a local baker, and she made a beautiful cake for my wife's birthday. And the flowers, she used real flowers, so we ate the cake and put flowers. My wife put it in a little pot, and I thought, well, I'm gonna let that go to waste. I decided to paint it. So that was kind of right at the end of, maybe in June. So her birthday's in June the 27th. So this is painted the last few weeks before my show. So, and here, these three are on copper. This one apparently is going out west to the United States, to Wyoming. These two, the above and below, are reminiscent of my experience in New Brunswick, a place off the St. John River. Again, with these really intense colors, I've been playing those off: cadmium orange, phthalo green, phthalo blue, yellow ochre light. That seems to be on my palette a lot. These four are, this is a, I wanted to paint, sometimes you want to paint things like, this is a ditch, and that's the name of the painting, The Ditch. And it's just a ditch off the highway, and I thought, well, I don't know, I like the shapes in it, and that's all I care about, is it's an interesting painting. Clouds, those are all straightforward. And this is one of my favorite paintings I've ever painted, and it's on its way out west. And I'm really happy with this painting, because it's one of those paintings that just, if you paint this, then you could paint this, and they go together, and that means you can paint this. And one thing, it's like a domino, and then when all the dominoes have fallen, you look at this thing and you go, I didn't plan on this at all. All the dominoes fell, and I ended up with something that I'm really happy with. And it's almost as if I didn't paint that, but I did, and I signed it, and I'm really happy with that. Somebody painted that, and it happened to be me, but it painted itself. It made sense somehow. I'm really proud of that piece. These are from my imagination and various things, playing with paint application. There's a lot of my finger and knife, palette knife, and it was fun to paint that. I just really had a lot of fun painting that. This was the same thing. I love the colors playing off. That's a coral red, and that purple, it's a Egyptian violet brought up with white, and those two colors. Then I had to put something below it, and at the last minute I thought, well, let's put some smoke out of there. and it seemed to work. Something like that one too. This is kind of reminiscent of some pack ice that I saw outside of Wolfville probably 15 years ago, and I just thought, well, I'm going to do that. I applied that with a palette knife, and it kind of reminded me of that. And this is primarily secondary colors, which is green and orange and purple. Not a lot of purple. There's some down here, I guess. And that's nice. That. And what else? There's a couple from my experience out in Saskatoon. A friend of mine flies me out there for workshops, and I teach for a few days and come home, and I love the landscape and the people out there. People say Saskatoon and Halifax are very similar, and I do get a similar vibe. I've only had contact with maybe 30 people or 35 people, but I do get the same vibe. Saskatoon's a good place. I like Saskatoon. Those are taken from, I think the landscape is really interesting, and to people out there say, oh, it's just flat and boring, and I go, well, it isn't. I think this is fascinating, and I couldn't wait to come home and paint it. And I might have amped up the color or turned it in. Actually, speaking of still life, that landscape is, to me, I thought of what would a specific painter, I had a couple of painters in mind, how it, that maybe it died 150 years ago, if they were 30,000 feet in the air, how would they interpret that scene? And one of them happened to be a still life painter, and I thought, how would a still life painter from 1870, looking out the airplane window, look at that? And I had that in mind as I was painting it. So that's a fun experiment if you paint. So give that a shot.
Nice.
And there's a little figurative piece around the corner and another little landscape.
I'm gonna get just a video of them here. Yeah.
And somebody bought the figurative piece, which is always satisfying.
And another still life.
And another still life, a little still life, yeah.
That's
so
great.
It's a show of small paintings, and there's lots of them still available, and lots of sold, and we're so happy about that because, as we say, nobody knew what was down the road, and it turns out that things really worked out well this year. So I'm looking forward to show number 18 now. So, and that's about it.